All right, so hi everyone once again. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who just joined, welcome to our show. What we'll be discussing today is what UX hiring managers look for in early career UX candidates. We have an amazing guest speaker for you today who's one of the pioneers of the UX fields and has an incredible amount of experience in this field. We'll share lots of great insights with you today and also answer questions. We'll introduce our wonderful guest in just a moment. Not sure if he needs an introduction, but we'll still introduce him. For those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Michael, and I'm the founder of a New York City-based company called BeginX. What it is, it's a part-time UX career accelerator based on real mission-driven client projects that helps people who know UX basics transition into the field in one of the most effective ways by not just gaining the hard skills, but also the crucial soft skills and building a strong portfolio with several real client team projects and real work experience while getting hands-on career prep to master UX job search and interviewing necessary to actually land a UX role. And so far, the grads have been hired by quite a few well-known companies. Awesome. So now let's get to the most fun part and introduce our awesome guest, and then we'll jump into the talk and then the interview. So really excited to introduce Jared Spool, who I'm sure nearly everyone in the UX community already knows. Just to give you more background, so Jared is one of the pioneers and top thought leaders of the UX field for his work in usability and human factors in design. Jared is the co-founder and co-CEO at Center and the founding principal and CEO at User Interface Engineering, which is a leading research, training, and consulting firm specializing in website and product usability. Jared has been instrumental in shaping the way we actually think about UX design today, particularly through his extensive research and insights into user behavior and importance of good design in digital products. And on top of that, he's also an amateur magician. Jared, great to have you here. Thanks again for joining us. I'm really excited to have this discussion with you. So first, Jared will do a talk that will cover this important topic, and then we'll jump into the interview part and also take, again, lots of questions from the audience, hopefully all of them. And yeah, we'll take it from there. With that said, I'd like to hand it over to Jared Spool.
Oh, lost my mute button for a second. Okay, I got it. Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael, for the very kind introduction. And I just want to point out that the thing that separates an amateur magician from a paid magician is that an amateur magician can't find anyone interested in paying them for their magic. That's the only difference. And so pretty much everybody is an amateur magician. Today, I thought we would talk about what it means for hiring managers to look at early career candidates. And I've been working with hiring managers for the last decade, helping them build their teams and find great people. And so I've learned a lot about how hiring works and what people look for. And so I thought we could go through that. Where I'd like to start is sort of talk about the job market right now. So two things that I find myself saying to people every day. First, the field of UX is growing. It's not just growing in terms of numbers, but it's growing in terms of influence and contribution in organizations. When I started in this field in the 1980s, before anybody talked about it as user experience, back then we had all sorts of other funny names like usability and human factors engineering and a variety of other things. Nobody understood why this needed to exist. And finding a job where they would pay you to do this was almost impossible. In fact, in the 1980s, almost all of my jobs were being hired as a programmer and not a UX person, just because nobody hired UX people. it was a job you did along with some other job. But in the 90s and in the 2000s in particular, UX became a thing. And as a result, people got very excited about it. It took a big boost right after websites came around because all these companies realized that a website that nobody could use was a waste of money. So they started investing in that. And then it took an even bigger jump after the iPhone came out and the world of apps became a thing, and websites started to be more transactional. You went to a website and you did a thing like buy something or join a community or something like that. And so the experience that people had was even more important to the success. So this has been growing ever since. There was a straight curve of growing all the way until now. However, there was a spike in 2022 where there was a large number of people grown, primarily because 2021, 2022, primarily because folks in the tech industry decided that they were going to hire tons of people on speculation. And what I mean by that is they were hiring people even though they didn't have work for them to do, mostly because they wanted to prevent somebody else from hiring them. So you saw this amongst companies like Amazon and Google and Netflix and Facebook, Meta, that they would just hire dozens, sometimes hundreds of people at a swath just to keep them off the market and put them someplace else. What happened was that in 2023, they realized that those speculative jobs were no longer doing them, and that plus a change in the tax code in the U.S. at least, where in 2020 there was the introduction of a R&D credit that allowed you to reduce the amount of taxes you paid for each employee. That expired in 2023, and the Republican-run Congress did not refuse to renew it. So suddenly all these companies that had these employees that actually weren't contributing anything to their bottom lines, they decided to get rid of them. So there was a big let go. There's a rumor going around that somehow UX was more heavily affected. That there's no evidence to suggest that was true. The entire market was affected all at once. You saw companies laying off 5,000, 10,000 people at a time, and they were all different people. It wasn't UX people. Nobody has 10,000 UX people. So that was the case. But since that sort of big purge in the second half of 2023 and early 2024, we have seen things return to normal, and the current number of positions on the market, the current amount of hiring is back following the curve that actually led up to 2021 before the spike. So things are still growing, things are still moving up and to the right. It's still a good profession to join. But that said, the hiring environment, the hiring market right now sucks. And it sucks primarily for three main reasons. The first reason is all of the layoffs because of the tax credit and the speculative hiring. So there's a lot of people who were laid off. There are hundreds of people on the market, thousands of people on the market right now who are victims of layoffs. Many of them with a lot of experience, some of them with less experience, but they are highly experienced people for the most part. The second reason is that there are a lot of boot camps and other sort of programs that have flooded the market with graduates, promising that they would help them find jobs, but often failing to do that. And so there's a lot of boot camp graduates who have very little experience who are coming in to this. And the third reason, I should put that up here, the reason that the market sucks is that right now there's a real plethora of folks who are applying for jobs that are remote. And that's great, except that one of the forcing functions before everybody went remote was that you would only apply to jobs that were near you. And now you can reply to jobs that are thousands of miles away, which means every job between here and there you can apply to. So what's happening is all of this is resorting to basically everyone applying everywhere. And I want to take a moment and apologize. Apparently I chose the font sans legible for tonight. So if you're having trouble reading it, don't worry, I can't read it either. Anyways, this is the problem, right? This is why the market sucks. The current way that people hire is broken because the recruitment systems, both the human-run parts of the systems and the machinery parts of the system, were never designed for these conditions. And because of these conditions, you hear stories of people applying to jobs in hundreds of job applications and never hearing back from anybody. You hear about folks being ghosted in the middle of the process, all sorts of what would be in the past considered reprehensible behavior, but right now are survival techniques, because on the hiring side, it's just as bad. It is not uncommon for people to get hundreds or thousands of applications in a day. One group that I work with is I've done a lot of work with the federal government. Michael didn't mention that in 2015, 2016, I worked for President Obama in the White House. And the one team that was hiring last week, put up a job post last week, was basically the federal government job, this was a job at the Department of Homeland Security. It goes live at midnight, and then they just keep collecting applications until they hit their limit. And then at midnight that day, they shut it off. It turns out that normally they would get pre-pandemic, the federal government might get 10, 15 applications a day. They set a limit at 150, thinking that they would, run it for 5 or 6 or maybe even as many as 10 days. But instead, they hit the 150 applications by 7 in the morning, and by midnight, they'd had 450 applications. So this is what people are running into. And when you get 450 applications and you don't have the back end systems to deal with that, people don't hear from you. They get ghosted. They don't find out what is what the status is of their application. They might hear nothing for weeks on end. So that's the state of the market right now. So you have to get a little thick-skinned. You have to make sure that you don't take it personally when you don't hear back from somebody right away. They are completely swamped on their end. So that's a key piece of it. But there's another thing here, which is applying to open positions that you see advertised without any other context, just seeing an open position and applying to it is the second worst way to find a job. So if that's all you're doing, you are down at the bottom of how you should be looking for a job. The worst way to find a job is to not apply at all. So just applying to random open positions is a step above that. And it is true, you're not going to get a job if you don't apply. However, if you apply that way, you're probably not going to get a job either. Because the way I think of this is, if you watch the TV and you see them pull the lottery numbers, and they always have those big globes that have the little ping pong balls floating around in them, and then one pops out. That's basically what's happening to your resume. You enter it into a system and it may pop out, it may not pop out. It is not your fault if your resume doesn't pop out. It is not your fault if it pops out, but they never get around to calling you. There are so many things that are broken right now. If they've got a good back end system, they at least send you an email that says, we got your application and it's going to take us a while to get through the thousands of applications that we got. But many folks don't even have the systems in place to do that effectively. So you'll hear nothing. So don't take it personally. Don't get upset. So if those are the two worst ways to apply for a job, one being not to apply, then how should you do it? And the answer is that you have to stand out, right? You have to be different. And right now, the easiest way to be different is to actually be highly qualified for the position. So that's the trick. That's the thing that will get you recognized. What people are doing on the hiring side is they're putting all sorts of screening in. They have machine screening in many cases. They have human screening in many cases. And basically what that screening is doing is it's taking your resume, your portfolio, and your cover letter. You should have a cover letter. Anybody who tells you shouldn't doesn't know what they're talking about. Taking those three things and looking for the same keywords that are in the job ad. Job ads are written very specifically. Hiring managers have a specific job in mind when they are thinking about this. Let me rephrase that. Most hiring managers have a specific job in mind when they post a position. I say most because what we're really talking about here are the smart hiring managers. There's a lot of non-smart hiring managers. You'll know you'll run into a non-smart hiring manager because they do a variety of things. For example, they use the same exact job description for every post they ever make, no matter what. Or they have lots of conflicting requirements, like they want someone who is an intern with 10 years of experience in e-commerce and AI technology, or something along those lines. Those are not smart hiring managers. And we can sit here and complain about all the poorly written job descriptions there are in the world, which is fine. I'm happy to sit with you and complain about that. But the reality is that this is a fact of what's called Sturgeon's Law. Sturgeon's Law is, you can look it up in the Wikipedia. Sturgeon's Law is basically 90% of everything is crap. It came from Theodore Sturgeon, who's a sci-fi writer, who said that, who was asked, how come 90% of all science fiction writing is crap? And he thought about it for a second. He said, well, 90% of everything is crap. So that's Sturgeon's law. And hiring managers fall into that category. So 90% of hiring managers are crap. The ones who you want to work for are the 10% who aren't. And this is why this is important. The most important thing a manager does is build their team. If you build the wrong team, you will spend all your time trying to fix it instead of actually getting your team to do great work. On the other hand, if you build the right team, you will spend all of your time helping that team do amazing things in the organization. Every new member you bring onto your team improves your contribution and your capabilities to the rest of the organization. Every poor member you bring on your team is just someone who eats up your time and doesn't contribute. So the most important thing a hiring manager can do is hire the right people. And if they don't have the skills to hire the right people, they are not a good manager, because they're going to spend all their time on the back end dealing with the fact that they hired the wrong people, which means that if you go work for them, A, you probably aren't the right person. B, they're going to spend a lot of time trying to make you a person you're not. And C, they are going to you're going to be on a team where everybody's not contributing, and you're going to have trouble doing good work. So when you see these applications that are poorly written, think of it as you are dodging a bullet, because it's not a team you want to work for. So if the job position is poorly written, you don't want to work for those people. Just ignore it, move on. Let all the people who apply to everything apply to those positions. Don't worry about that. Okay. So hiring managers have a specific job in mind, and they're looking for people with a specific set of what's called comparable experience. Comparable experience is the evidence that you have the skills and experience to do the work that they need to get done. And remember, they have very specific things in mind. And this is true whether they're hiring someone who needs to have a lot of experience or someone who needs to not have a lot of experience. Now, there are a lot of hiring managers who specifically look for people who are early in their career, but not all hiring managers are looking for that. And in fact, it's not that they don't want them, it's that the work that they need done, someone who's early in their career can't do. Sometimes you need someone who has a lot of domain expertise. So for instance, if they're working in healthcare, they would really like to have someone who knows a lot about the specific portion of healthcare they're in. If they're working on electronic health records, they would really want someone who's had work in electronic health records, because it takes years to get good at electronic health record work. And they don't want to wait years before this person is up to speed. So they would rather hire someone who is on the market today who has 5 or 10 years of experience with that. But in other cases, they actually want people who are early in their career, who don't have that experience. Because one of the burdens that a hiring manager has when they hire someone who has a lot of experience is that those people come with their own ideas on how things should be done. And it actually takes more work to deprogram them to do things a different way than it does to take someone who is basically a blank slate and bring them up the way they want it to work. Let me give you an example. Imagine you are someone who's been working as a chef in a food truck. You get really good at working as a chef in a food truck. But the thing about being a chef in a food truck is that there's no room for anybody else. So you're basically a one-person show. Maybe, because I just saw a food truck that had two people in it, you're a two-person show, but you are not a big kitchen. But let's say you make amazing food in your food truck, and someone who's opening some large 200-seat Michelin star restaurant wants you to come join their team, where there'll be 15 chefs in the kitchen. Frankly, I'm going to bet that that executive chef is not going to be that interested in hiring a food truck person, because a food truck person doesn't know how to work with 14 other chefs. They've been a one-person show. And if they got really good at what they did, it's going to be really hard to get them to be good again at that. So in many cases, what do? They hire somebody who's right out of cooking school. They give them early career stuff like, you chop lettuce for a while, and then you make salads for a while, and then we'll work you up from station to station to station. If you're good, you get your job, you move up from station to station to station. It's fun work all the way along. And that is what happens. So there are hiring managers, there are jobs out there that are looking for people early in their careers. Sometimes they're internships, sometimes they're fellowships, sometimes they are just, we are looking for someone early in their career. So all of that is the process by which they are thinking. And those are the jobs you want to look for and apply to. You apply to a job where they're looking for someone who's got a lot of experience doing a bunch of things, and you don't have that experience, you're wasting your time and you're wasting their time. So that's what they are currently shuffling through when they get 600 applications in 24 hours, and they need to find one person who matches the job they need to get done. So you want to have the comparable experience. Now, here's how you know how you'll have the comparable experience. You carefully read the job description. You read each sentence in the paragraphs that describe what the job is. You read each sentence in the paragraph that describes what the company does. You read each bullet in the requirements section. You read each bullet in the what you'll do section. And for each of those bullets, you ask yourself, do I have a story to tell that would show a hiring manager or a recruiter, whoever's doing the screening, that I am thoroughly experienced and have what they need to do fantastic at this job? That's it. That is what you need to do. It's not very hard, but people don't do it. And they just see a job and it says, UX designer, and they think, I can do UX design, and they apply. And they don't read through the pieces. So the first thing you have to do is you have to make sure you have a story for practically every bullet and every sentence in that job description. Now, hiring managers look for, when they make their job ads, the smart hiring managers, I'm going to qualify it again, the smart hiring managers make two lists when they're putting together their job description. They make a list which is must-haves, and they make a list which are nice-to-haves. And in the must-have categories, they write down a bunch of things that they will need someone to do that they must already have experience for. So you need stories for each of these things. If you are missing one of them, you will probably be disqualified in an early round because these are must-haves. And by stories, I mean you can tell them very succinctly what work you've done in the past that demonstrates without a doubt that you could handle this job. So that's the must-have list. In the nice-to-have list, there's also a list of things. But these are the things that if you don't have them, they're okay with training you. So this is basically, they'll train you on this, and this is the list of things they won't train you on. They want you to already know how to do this, right? That's it. It's that simple. This is how a smart hiring manager thinks. And it's okay if you have half of these for most hiring managers. They will be cool with the idea that there are still a couple of things that they're going to have to train you on. If they have to train you on all of them, you're going to look less appealing than someone who has more of them. But most hiring managers go for one half of these and 100% of those. And you can usually tell, because in a lot of job ads, it will say, you must have experience doing this, doing this, doing this. But if you have experience doing this, we would love to talk to you. If you've worked in this industry, we would love to talk to you. So you look for those things. So again, you're looking for someone for a job where you have stories. Now, interestingly, there are a couple things you can ignore in the job ad. And one of them is the number of years of experience. There are other things like good communication skills or must be able to collaborate on a team. Things that anyone in any job would have to have. The reason these are in job ads is because they need a reason to explain why they decided not to hire you. Not you particularly, but anybody. They need a generic reason to just decide they weren't going to hire anybody. And this is because, at least in the United States, due to the litigious nature of people in the United States, they don't want someone coming and saying that they were discriminated against because of their race or gender or eye color or whatever. No doubt about it, discrimination is bad. They shouldn't be doing it. But they put a bunch of these things in every job ad. Years of experience, amount of education are some of these. And in most cases, they don't check those things off. They don't care. They don't look at those things. But what they do is if you were to be rejected and then you raised your hand and said, wait a second, you're rejecting me because of my gender, my race, my sexual preference, or whatever it is, they would say, no, actually, we rejected you because you didn't have enough years of experience, or you're not a team player, or whatever the requirement is. So there's a bunch of these things that just give them a way to avoid being sued. And so they put those in. And then you have to prove that that wasn't why they rejected you, and there's no way for you to prove that, so you basically don't have a suit. That's the reason those things are there. No one is going to not hire a candidate who has every single thing on their must-have list and almost everything on their nice-to-have list, but is one day short of the minimum number of years of experience. They're not going to do that. And in fact, in many cases, you'll see things like or equivalent, which again is just weasel legal words that lets them basically do anything they want. So this is key. Ignore the number of years of experience, but show that you have all the must-haves and most of the nice-to-haves. And if you don't have those things, don't apply. Don't fill up the hiring manager's application stuff. Let someone else apply and focus on the jobs that you are likely to get. Now, when you're early in your career, you're going to have limited number of things that you can tell stories about here. That's just the nature of being early in your career. And every hiring manager knows that people who are early in their career have limited experience. In fact, for you, that's a plus because they don't have to teach you how not to do the things you learned how to do somewhere else. So this is fine. Don't worry about this. And if they're good at what they do, they have tweaked the job ad so that you will have that experience. So you can go and you can look at work you've done in school, you can look at side projects, you can look at internships, and you can see, do you have the stories for this? Now, let me talk about the stories for a second, because that's really important. When I say, do you have the stories? It's a simple process. Actually, I have a 3-step process to this. In step 1, what we do is you go through every bullet, every line in that job ad, and you create a question, which is basically, it's not really a question because it doesn't have a question mark, but you imagine it's an interview question. And the question is, tell me a time when, and then it's whatever's in the bullet. So for example, if the bullet says, what would the bullet say? If the bullet says, you have taken wireframes and moved them into high fidelity designs and handed them off to developers, that's step 1, right? Tell me about a time when you took wireframes, made them into high fidelity designs, and then gave them to developers. And I forgot to tell you step 0. Step 0 is find a really good friend. Not just a friend, a really good one. And the difference between a friend and a really good friend is that a really good friend is the type of friend who will tell you when you didn't do good enough, when your answer isn't a good answer, and that you have to try it again. That's what a really good friend does. So you find that really good friend, and then together you create these tell me a time when questions out of every line item in that job ad. And then your friend asks you the questions. And you give them the story of when you did that thing. Oh, well, when I was working on this project for school, I worked with a developer and a researcher, and there was me, and they took my wireframes and we reviewed them and we put them in front of users, and then I converted those wireframes. Once we had the designs we liked, I converted those wireframes into a higher fidelity design, and then we took that higher fidelity design and the developers built it, and then I worked with the researcher to do usability testing. That's the story I'm talking about, right? You've gone through the process that was in that bullet. and you can talk about how you did it. And then they're going to ask you a whole bunch of questions like how long did it take, and how many people did you have in the usability tests, and what things did you learn during the testing that you had to go back and do. They're going to ask you a million little questions, and that's part of the interview, and that's great. Your friend is going to ask you these questions, and you're going to pretend you're in an interview and you're going to answer them. And the first time you answer them, you're going to stumble over the words, sort of like I did. But then they're going to ask you again, and you'll get better at it. And they'll ask you again, and you'll get better at it. And you'll get it nice and crisp and short, and you'll make it be a fantastic story. And the reason you're going to do all that is because in step 2, what you want to do is you want to repeat this process with the same job ad and the same questions, except now you're going to add visuals. And by visuals, I mean, at some point in the story, if you don't have anything to show, you're basically talking about design like someone would try to use interpretive dance to talk about architecture. It's very awkward to describe design. So at some point, you're going to want visual aids, some sort of supporting pictures that are going to tell you what, or they're going to help you tell your story. They're going to be there to help you get that story across. And so those visual aids, that's what you're doing in step 2. And these are the things that you'll bring to your interview. You can put them in your portfolio, but this is your interview portfolio, which doesn't necessarily have to be the same as your application portfolio. These are the work samples, some people call them work samples, that you bring along to the interview, so that if somebody asks you the tell me a time when question, you've got your evidence to say, this is what the wireframe looked like. This is what the high fidelity design looked like. This is what the final thing the developer built. So you'll have those things so they can see what you did and how you did it. And then they'll have a million questions about how'd you decide on that font and that color, and why did you do it this way, and what did you learn when you put it in front of users, and all of those questions. They will have, what was the hardest thing that you did, what was the who did you work with, which, by the way, one of the visuals you can bring is an org chart that says who was on the team and who were the stakeholders and who were the users. Any sort of visual, a visual that showed your process would be a good visual too, right? Anything that tells your story is game. Then we have the third step in our 3-step process that starts at 0. And the third step, pretend that's a 3. Okay. The third step is that you want to have your good friend ask you the question, but you're not allowed to talk, right? So the third step is you have to have all of the answer that you had in the first step in either your resume, your portfolio, or your cover letter. And your friend has to be able to find the answers to that really fast. There's a myth going around that a recruiter or a hiring manager will only look at your resume for 30 seconds. That turns out to be completely false. Mostly. It's true if you have absolutely no obvious comparable experience. But if you've done a really good job on your resume, your portfolio, your cover letter, the answers to the questions for the job that you are talking about will jump off the page. And that will stop them from moving to the next resume or portfolio or application in general. They will stop because they are desperately trying to find you. If you are the person who has all of the must-haves and most of the nice-to-haves, you are the person they are hunting for. They will take the time to read every word of your documents. The only people they skip are the people who, at first glance, it's pretty obvious they are absolutely the wrong person. So, 3 steps. The first one is with talking, you tell a story. The second one is you tell the story with visuals. And the third one is you tell the story without talking, only with the documents you have, which may include some of the visuals from here, but probably need a lot more. So that's the process. So what goes into your resume, your portfolio, your cover letter? The answers to these questions. Think of your application packet as your very first interview. You don't get to be there. The interview happens without you. All of your application documents do it for you. So how do you prepare those documents to prove that you have the comparable experience to do what the position is looking for? If you do it this way, you're going to apply to a lot fewer positions, but the ones you apply to are far more likely to call you back, to have interviews, and you're far more likely to get to an offer. I have a lot more tips, and we're going to answer questions that you have. Well, I have a lot more tips, and we've been compiling them in a video series that we've put in our UX Essentials library that we have, which is essentials.centercenter.com. We have a video series called Finding Your Next UX Job. And I've got a coupon here for 10% off. 10% off is just $2 because the whole thing costs $20. That's what it costs for us to make it. So I'm giving you $2. You go ahead, apply, and take this. It's about 3 hours of material with a lot of people's Q&A and stuff. So I have the link right here. I just put it in the chat. So you'll be able to go ahead and buy this. The offer is good for however long, but you're not going to remember past tomorrow. So don't wait. And then the other thing is I have a free thing. So no coupon, it's just free. Sorry. And that's for a community we have of 50,000 people. We actually we flipped the meter on the 50,000th person today. So you can go ahead and join that community. Would love to have you there. There's people there. It's for people who lead UX, which if you're not leading UX today, I trust you will be leading UX at some point. So feel free to join us and be a part of it. There's lots of great folks in there. It's a great community, so you can join. Believe it or not, there's 50,000 UX people, and they exist in the Leaders of Awesomeness community. That's what it's called, Leaders of Awesomeness. So feel free to join that. Feel free to buy the Essentials library at $2 under our cost. So yeah, I'm losing money on you already. So yeah, that's what I came to talk to you about. So let's take some questions. Michael, how'd I do?
All right. Amazing. Thank you, Jared. Yeah, that was awesome. That was lots of useful tips. So let's jump into the discussion. And just a quick reminder for everyone in the audience. So if you have questions, please use that Q&A tab. This way, you can also upvote others' questions, and please do that as well. This way, we can basically prioritize and then make sure we address the most popular ones that most people are interested in. But we'll try to get to as many as possible. And again, just as a reminder, we'll take audience questions as we go through this interview to make things more interactive, but we'll also do like a more formal Q&A after that, right? So stick around if you'd like to hear the answers. All right. So Jared, great talk. I don't even know. I'm like out of questions. You know, you pretty much answered a lot of them. You know, so.
Well, I see 22 in the Q&A, so we could start there.
Yeah, well, definitely. So I do have some prepared, and maybe we can do a quick recap on some of the points. So I know you discussed this earlier, right? But if you were to recap, right, and basically distill it down to like the top 3 to 5 things that, in your opinion, make a junior candidate more marketable and attractive to employers in general. I know there are like different roles and positions, and make them stand out in the competitive job market. What would those 3 to 5 things be?
It's one thing, Michael, and it's they match the job ad. Right? That anything else, people are lying to you, right? Every hiring manager is looking for different things. Every job requires doing different things. If you're going to work, right now, I have a project that I'm working on with a client where it's a Fortune 500 company, one of the largest manufacturers in the world. They are completely redoing their supply chain system. And they need both senior people and junior people to join their team. They need senior people who have expertise in supply chain management and to make these heavy designs. But these systems are used by 20,000 people all over the world, and they need to redesign every screen. They have more than 100 applications. The most recently built application was updated 14 years ago. So these things are old and they're clunky and they have bad user experience. And what they're going to use the junior folks for is they're going to use the junior folks to basically do production work, to go through every screen and clean it up, match it to the new design system, make sure that the developers are using it. It's work that doesn't require a lot of creative skills per se. You're working at a micro level. You're doing very fine detail work. All of it has to be great, but you don't have to be the world's best designer to do this work. In fact, they don't want the world's best designer because this project doesn't require the world's best designer. And the world's best designer is going to go off and do things that they don't need done because they want to leave their mark and make it be the world's best design. And this isn't the world's best design kind of application. It's an application that figures out how you get shipping containers through customs. And nobody needs the best design for that. They just need one that does the job really well for the people who use it. And it's just a lot of detail work. And so they need someone. It's a perfect job for someone new who wants to do the work of just learning the craft and learning to work in a work environment and learning to do UX work. And it'll be really interesting and challenging for maybe a year, 2 years, and then it'll start to get a little dull, but that's okay. By then you've shown them what you do, they're going to promote you, and they'll hire a junior designer to fill your job. And now you've got 2 years of experience, and they're putting you on more advanced stuff that takes advantage of other things that you have learned while you were there. So that's what they're looking for. So you have to prove to them that you can do that kind of work for a year, for 2 years, not complain that it's boring, not feel like you have to do it differently, but in fact, you can do that work really well and you will enjoy every minute of it. You will grow while you're doing it. You will learn everything they have to teach you. And then they're going to promote you into something that's even more challenging. And if you want that job, you have to prove to them you can do that job. And they will tell you in the job application exactly what you need. So what do you need? What is the thing you need to prove that you are the right person? You need to show them you can do that job really well. Now, what is that job? It's going to be different for every ad. So there isn't a thing. It isn't like, well, if you always keep one eyebrow higher than the other, you are a better designer. It's not going to be that. So there is no generic skill set. There's no generic uh, job titles. There's none of this. So it's just you go through the ad, you figure out what the must-haves are and the nice-to-haves are, and you go from there. That's it.
Yeah, so these are great points. So if you are, let's say someone is just starting out, right? What would you recommend to them? And what is your, and based on our earlier discussion, right, I want to kind of come back to this for a second. Now, what is your outlook on the future of more like generalist UX roles versus specialists? Do you think is going to be different at all than it was before, and why?
No, there is no such distinction. So this is not a thing. This is one of these things that people make up to justify why they think they're better than other people, but it's not a thing, right? There's no definition of a generalist or a specialist. What there are skills. There's an infinite number of skills that you can have in UX, right? You can be really good at understanding wayfinding and information architecture. You can be really good at visual design, or you can be really good at conducting research. And the thing that is the thing about this is let me there's this myth that goes around. This is one of the things when I'm working with hiring managers that I have to teach them out of, which is unfortunately there are people who go around talking about T-shaped people, and a T-shaped person is someone who is good at one thing. So let's say this is UI design. And there are lots of little things that they sort of know about, but they're not good at it. And people refer to this as a T-shaped person. Right? But this is not a real person. Nobody is good at just one thing. I mean, it's just not a thing. You know, and the people who argue for the T-shaped folks talk about how you can't be good at everything, so you might as well become really good at one thing. And that's a lot of crap. You absolutely can be good at everything. You just have to try. Okay. So instead, we talk about what we call a broken comb shaped person, where each one of these things represents some set of skills that you might have as a UX designer or a researcher or a banjo player or a banjo playing UX designer researcher. And so all of these things are there. So we call this either the broken comb, or someone pointed out to me that if you put a little bubble on top, it becomes a jellyfish. But the fact is that what this is these are all different skills. And you know what? You know how you get skills? By practicing. So the more you practice, the more your skills grow. And as you practice, you get better. So over the period of your career, you're going to get better at these things. Now, you can try and just get better at one thing, or you can try to get better at a lot of things. And the difference here is that this is a zero-sum model of the way people learn. And the zero-sum model says that if you try to be good at too many things, you will fail at all of them. It turns out, there's an old saying, which is jack of all trades, master of none, but that's actually only half of the saying. Jack of all trades, master of none is the first part. The second part is, however, more skills is better than none, or better than one. That's it. Jack of all trades, master of none. More skills is better than one. So the fact is that you don't want to have just one skill that you're good at, because what happens is you are less valuable to your manager, because you are only useful when there is work on UI design. And in all the parts of the project where there's not much UI design to do, you have to sit out because you are no better than someone on the street. So if they really want you to be good at something, they want you good on a lot of things. And so you just come in when you are starting, your broken comb is going to look a lot like this. And don't be afraid, right? Your first job, after your first job, whatever it is, your first assignment, your first project, your broken comb's going to look more like that. And then maybe it's going to look more like this. And then maybe it's going to look more like this. And over time, and then maybe you pick up the banjo as a hobby, and sure enough, you've got another skill. Maybe two, because you learn to read music at the same time. And so these are the skills. And you're just going to get better. You learn something about health records. You learn something about clinical environments. You learn something about working with product managers. And over time, your skills get better and better. And what you really want to do is have stories for each of the skills that you really like, so that you can tell those stories when someone says, so tell me about a time that you did UI design. And you can say, let me tell you about that time I did UI design. And you've got a great story. That's how you do it. Don't worry about this generalist specialist thing. It's a bunch of crap.
Awesome. All right. And I know you mentioned earlier, right? This can vary a lot as well based on the job, right? But I want to still touch on the soft skills, right? So, and I know you said that communication and team collaboration is listed on almost like any job description, not just UX. Do you want to highlight, to recap, maybe like some of the most common soft skills people should really practice and build up that would make them better?
You can't practice soft skills. You just grow soft skills, right? By the way, we don't call them soft skills because they're actually quite hard. We call them power skills. But the thing about power skills is there are things like being a good communicator. You know how you practice being a good communicator? You talk to people. You listen to people. You actually do what's called active listening, which is when somebody talks, you repeat back to them what you thought they heard. So, or you heard what you thought you heard them say. And so those are communication skills, which tonight I am obviously lacking. The thing here is that we have all these rules that people who have never spent time actually studying the process of how people get hired believe will get you hired. And most of those rules don't exist. They are just things people made up. There are sort of rules like, you should never eat chocolate before you go to bed. It's like, no, I'm definitely eating chocolate before I go to bed. I will do that until the day I die. Because eating it while you're in bed just leaves messy crumbs, and then you wake up and it's all melted and it's gross. So of course you eat it before you go to bed. So this is the thing. Most of these things are not what we should be talking about, right? What we should be talking about is how do you make sure you match what's in the job ad. That's it. So if they list something in the job ad, like you need to be a good communicator, then you better have stories about a time when you were a really good communicator, because they're going to ask you about that. They might ask you about, tell me about a time when you worked with someone who seemed to conflict their opinions with you. So you better have a story about how you managed to get the project done, even though you didn't always agree with everybody that you worked with, right? These are the types of things that you're going to have to do. And you're just going to learn them as time goes on. And when you get home from an interview, you're going to want to go through all the questions, like bring a notepad to the interview, write down every question you get asked, and then do a retrospective, do a reflection on which questions did you stumble through and which questions did you have a clear story for, and then get your good friend back, which, by the way, you better buy them something nice for the holidays because they're a really good friend. And you get your good friend back and probably chocolate that they can eat before they go to bed. You have them ask you those questions and you practice. Everything in this world is about practice. You want to get good at something, you have to practice. If you thought I was good at this tonight, it's only because I've been practicing this set of tips now for months as I talk to people. So it's just practice. That's all it is. Do we have questions from people in the audience here?
Of course, yeah. And
let's
what we're
take
going to
some.
do, actually, yeah, what we're actually going to do is I just want to remind everyone to please upvote, review everyone's questions, upvote the ones that you're, really interested in. And this way, we definitely make sure we kind of, address the most interesting ones. And also, what I would like everyone to do is, not everyone, but let us know in the chat, what was your biggest takeaway so far? So just use the chat and yeah, list out your biggest takeaways. And what have you learned so far? What was the biggest insight? And while you guys are doing that, I'll take this question. So with the most upvotes from Crystal. So Jared, Crystal is asking, how can you tailor your resume and cover letter efficiently and sustainably for each position? I'm realistically trying to imagine rewriting for keywords for each posting and having a hard time understanding how.
Okay, I get this question a lot. First, you're applying to a lot fewer jobs because you're not going to find thousands of jobs for early career people who have stories that you can match. The reason is you just don't have that much experience. Over time, you might, but right now you don't. So you're going to find you're going to find a job and you're going to go through it and you're going to realize you have a lot of great stories for this and you're going to write something up. So the first time you do this, it's going to take you a while. But then you're going to keep looking for jobs and you're going to find a second job. And because you're early in your career and you don't have a lot of varied experience, the second job is likely to have incredibly similar requirements as the first job, which means most of the stuff you wrote in the cover letter and the resume and in your portfolio and your case studies will match from the first job. And so you'll probably have to tweak it. You definitely want to make sure that you use the same keywords they use. So if they call them high fidelity prototypes, you want to use the phrase high fidelity prototypes. If they use Photoshop mock-ups, you want to use the phrase Photoshop mock-ups. If they use FigJam, you want to use FigJam. Whatever word they use, you want to use. Because if they are using some sort of mechanical screening, people call it AI, but it's actually AS, it's artificial stupidity. All it's doing is keyword matching. And as a result, you have to have the keywords. If you don't have if you apply to a federal government job, there's literally an army of people who take the keywords and look for them in your application, in your federal CV resume. If you don't have a government resume that has, which is different than a regular resume, if you don't have a government resume that has all the keywords that are mentioned in the ad, you will not make it to the next phrase. You will just be rejected out of hand. I've seen people who were perfect matches for the job, who phoned in their resume because they figured, I mean, they already worked in the same department. They were just applying for the new position, and they got rejected because their resume did not match the keywords. They should have known better. They only make that mistake once. That's what you have to do. So this is key. You need to have this you need to have the keywords match. So that's probably the rewrite you're going to do. And, you know, it's easy to duplicate a document and make changes. So don't be afraid of having an individual resume, an individual portfolio, right? An individual cover letter for each job. It's not that hard to do. Think of it as a design problem. How would you design that?
Awesome. Thank you, Jared. So in the chat, I see a lot of people, your chocolate messaging resonated with a lot of people. So that was one of the takeaways.
There we go. There we go. I am all pro chocolate.
All right. And some of the other keywords that I see, power skills, still enlightening me, funny. As a chocolate fanatic, I support this messaging.
There you go.
Match JD. Another message about chocolate. All right, amazing. Loved value, generalist versus specialist versus skills, telling a story, three-step story process. All right, awesome, awesome. Great work, guys. Yeah, keep those coming. Yeah, feel free to share, like, what was your biggest insight so far? I want to take next question from Oriana, so which got lots of upvotes as well, which is talking about experience, right? So we can maybe expand on that a little bit, Jared. What level of experience is expected from a junior UX UI designer? I've seen 90% of job applications for junior, the requirements are always bachelor's and 3+ years of experience. Can someone with no work experience but a great portfolio be considered?
It's a great question. And the answer is, for 99% of the jobs, the answer is absolutely yes. There are 1% of the jobs are going to, if it says 3 years, you better have 3 years of dates. You better have your first job be more than 3 years to the day from today. But that's just 1%, 1 out of 100 jobs. The rest of them, they're not going to pay any attention to the number of years of experience you have. And here's why. Because years of experience does not predict performance. You could have someone who gets a job and their entire job is drawing the same boxes on the same screen over and over and over again. And they could do that for 10 years. You can have someone else who's been working for 10 years, but every year they took on a bigger project that had more responsibility, that required them to exercise more skills, that required that they learn more things, that had more contacts with more parts of the organization, that served more customers. Every year, this is called an achiever pattern, and a good hiring manager always looks for an achiever pattern. So every year you're getting better and better and better and better. And so this is, a good hiring manager is looking for someone who's an achiever, that if you come in at year 5, that by year 7, you will have grown and are doing even more. And by year 8, you'll be doing even more. And so that's what they're looking for. So ignore the requirement for a bachelor's in 3 years, because if you match everything on their job description, they are going to want to talk to you, and they will figure out a way to get you through whatever rules are requiring them to put that there, of which almost always there is no rule that requires them to put that there, unless they decide to reject you. And then they can say, well, you didn't have the 3 years. But if they're keeping you in the process and they eventually make you an offer, no one's going to go back and check and say, you can't make that person an offer. They don't have 3 years. They only have 2 years and 11 months. No one's going to do that. So you can pretty much ignore that requirement and just focus on the ones that show what you can do, your comparable experience. And we didn't talk about this, but this is an important thing. When you're a junior, how you learn is probably more important to tell the story of than what you did. So if the requirement is, tell me about a time where you had to take a wireframe and make a high definition product, high fidelity mock-up, and then you had to give that to the developers. As you tell that story, talk about what you learned all the way through. Talk about what you didn't know when the project started and what you learned during the project and how that made you a better designer. Talk about how the things you learned on your last project are going to help you on your next project. That you'd never worked in Figma before, but you picked it up pretty quick and you were able to make a high fidelity diagram really fast. And then you'd never actually worked with layers before, but the developers really wanted layers. So you learned how to do that. And now you label all your layers appropriately. These are the things they want to hear, because the more you convince them you know how to learn, the more excited they're going to get to have you come, because you're going to be able to learn the things they need you to learn. They're not expecting you to be able to do everything, especially as early career people. They want to know. So make sure you communicate how you learn as part of what your stories are.
Jared, and just a quick follow-up on that. What do you do about those recruiters that initially screen applications and they basically use that experience as a check mark potentially? Like, do you have any tips to address
Yeah,
that?
you find another job application, right? You're dodging a bullet. They can't possibly be putting a good team together because they don't actually know how to hire well. So the odds are you don't want to work there. It's the same question. What do you do if you walk into a restaurant and you notice that all the tables are dirty and there's gross stuff on the floor and that the kitchen is a mess? You don't order the food. It's simple.
All right. So basically apply to a different job. And
apply to a different job.
Hope it doesn't have that recruiter.
Don't waste your time on bad recruiters.
All right. And I know lots of people always have questions about experience and case studies, right? So, and I know we already touched on that topic. What I want to dig in a little deeper on is, how can you actually build some work experience while you're waiting for your next job?
Well, you shouldn't be waiting for your next job. You should be looking for your next job. And when you're looking for your next job, because if you just wait, nothing's going to happen.
That's a good point.
When you're looking for your next job, you look for the jobs where you have stories, and then you look for the jobs that you would really like to have, but you don't have stories. And you build up the stories. So the experience you want to build is any experience where you have a story to tell because you did that thing, right? So let's say you'd really like to be doing mobile apps, but you don't have any experience in your education. You didn't do any mobile app projects or whatever. Well, go design a mobile app. Join a church group or find a local charity that could use a mobile app, and go ahead and start working with them. Find out what they need. Go through the whole UX process. Interview stakeholders, interview users, find out what would be useful, and build an app. something that they could use. You know, go build an app for a church group. Go build an app for the local homeless shelter. Go build something that they could use that would make life more effective for them, improve their lives by building something that they could use. And then you have a story to tell about how you built this thing that someone can use. But decide what to build based on the jobs you want to have. It reminds me of the old saying, which is if you want a particular job, be the person who has that job. So if you want to be Batman, dress as Batman.
Awesome. That's a great point. So Crystal has another question. Will there be issues with your resume if your past projects never went live, even if it had nothing to do with you after?
It might, but it probably won't. And the reason I say this is the case where it might get you into an issue is if they are looking for someone who has actually worked on a project that went live. Because in tech, and in particular in UX, projects that go live, there are things that happen in the process of going live, and there are things that happen after you go live that if you've never done them before, you won't know what to do when you encounter that. And the hiring manager might be looking for someone who's actually made things go live and knows how to do the things. It's let's say, you've been to birthday parties, but you've never thrown a birthday party. It's a different job to throw a birthday party. There are things you do in planning the party, in preparing and making sure everything's all set up, in cleaning up after the party that you don't do if you're just an attendee at the party. So that's what they're looking for. And if that's what they're looking for, then yeah, not having done it is not going to get you the job. Right? But that may be on their list of things they're willing to train you. So if it's on their list of things they're willing to train you, it's not going to hurt you. You don't have to worry about that. So you just have to find a job where it's not necessary that you do the go live stuff, possibly because someone else is going to do it. Someone else is going to clean up the party or something else, right? There's a lot of reasons why you would never need that experience. So that's not an issue. Now, part of it is you have to be able to tell the stories of the work. And if you have no way of telling the story of your work without having the actual design be live, then you need to work on your storytelling skills. Because it's not that they need to see the live version. It's that you're not communicating what you built and how you built it. I have a friend who works for a large tech company. Everything she's ever done has been under NDA. She was just laid off. So now what she's doing is she's doing versions of what she built to be able to have a visual aid to say, this isn't what I built in the product, which hasn't shipped yet, but you could imagine something like this. It's not the same because I can't give you away some trade secrets, but this shows you the quality of the work. Let me talk about what the differences might be and why you're doing that. Turns out it was pretty easy for her to do some mock-ups that look a lot like the stuff she was going to build, but don't give away any secrets and therefore don't violate her NDA. So that's key. By the way, never violate your NDA. If you signed an agreement that says you won't tell people something, then do not ever show the work you promised you would never show, even if it's behind a password. If someone sends me a portfolio and it's got a password, the first question I ask is, are you allowed to show me everything? And if the answer is, well, I signed an NDA, but it's okay if with a password, I'm like, I'm not looking at it. I will not look at it. I will not open your portfolio. So smart managers will not open portfolios. In some companies, it's against corporate practice. It will immediately get you rejected. So instead, make sure everything that's in your portfolio, every visual aid you have, is something that you have permission to show, or is your work and you haven't signed over the rights. If you work for someone and they pay you in the United States, it's called work for hire, which means they own all the rights automatically unless they give you explicitly an agreement that says you have permission to show this to other people or give this to other people. If you're not sure, ask the manager. Ideally, before you sign the offer, you say, look, I would like to know what your policy is for me putting work that I do with you in my portfolio. And if they, and can we get that all written down right now so I know and you know and everyone is clear on what the agreement is, and then you do it that way.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge question. I get that all the time as well about NDAs. And I know with some employers and some projects, what you can do is, obviously, if that's what you agreed to, is just sanitize the work, basically just remove all the logos and mentioning the names, etc. But you can still show the work, but obviously they need to be okay with that. Alyssa is asking, what do you think about video cover letters? Will those help you? Will those help or hurt an application stand out?
I think the problem with a video cover letter is that video is a linear thing. You cannot skim a video. And hiring managers, when they first encounter an application package, skim. They're looking for the keywords that are evidence that you can do exactly what it said. So the problem with a cover letter that's a video is that it's not skimmable. The other thing is the cover letter should have direct conversation about the various things that are in the job ad, the most important things in the job ad. So if the job ad says you'll be a UI designer who takes designs from mock-up to high fidelity and hands them over to the developer, then your cover letter should say, the first thing in your cover letter should say, I think I am absolutely qualified for this job because I have several projects where I took a design from mock-ups to high fidelity prototypes to and then turn them over to developers and work with them through the development process. And the first one you should look at is such and such a case study, and you'll see the mock-up that I did, you'll see the high fidelity version, and you'll see this, right? So it'll be very tailored. You can do that in a video, but someone can't skim it. So what you really want to do is, if you're going to do a video, first, make sure it's accessible. It's got captions, it's got a transcript, and then make sure that, if you're going to do all that, why not just give them the transcript? So let them do that. Then the other problem with video cover letters is that many, and this is true for portfolios too, you need to have a PDF version of any portfolio you do, because a lot of systems do not let you go, a lot of work systems do not let you just go to random people's websites. When I worked at the White House, I was working on recruiting designers, product managers, developers to come join the president's new US digital service. And we were looking at people's resumes and portfolios. We could not access LinkedIn. We could not access any website that White House IT did not think was safe. So we couldn't look at anything. If you gave me a link, I couldn't look at it. In fact, if you gave me a link, there was special software that actually made links unclickable so that we didn't accidentally click on a link, get to a website that has a malware payload put in by the Chinese that's going to download and then copy everything on the White House servers. So we could not do any of that stuff. So you had to send me a PDF. If you didn't send me a PDF, I couldn't look at your portfolio. So the problem with something like videos is that they are not accessible the same way a single PDF cover letter would be.
Okay, yeah, so makes a lot of sense.
You're designing for an audience. Remember your audience.
So I know Sue is also asking, and a couple other people I think mentioned this. What are your thoughts on ATS resumes versus designed resumes? Do hiring managers, design managers, or directors expect a well-designed resume?
Bad ones do. Good ones have hundreds of applications and they could give a shit. They're just looking for the keywords. If you have a great resume to them is one that has comparable experience on it. A bad resume to them is a resume that doesn't show the comparable experience. The worst possible resume is a resume from someone who's highly qualified and they can't see the comparable experience, because that's a resume that didn't do its job. So, and because you don't know whether someone has an ATS on the other side, then you don't know what's going to get you canceled. So I wouldn't do that. The other thing about a couple other things about resumes. First, there is no page limit on resumes. Anybody who tells you there's a page limit on resumes is lying to you. What there is a limit on the number of things that you can put on a resume that have nothing to do with the comparable experience. If you start filling the resume with all sorts of things they don't care about, like how you love canoeing and pets with short hair, that's not going to get you a job unless you are going to work for a company that sells canoes and pets with short hair. So you better not put that stuff on your resume. It's a waste of everybody's time and space. What you want on the resume is it should map 100% to the job ad. Anything that doesn't map to the job ad is not interesting to the hiring manager, and it will not get you an interview. So that is key. Another thing is you don't want to use any tool that puts graphics on in layers, because the algorithm that is used to create PDFs from something that works in layers like Figma or Illustrator or InDesign, something that works in layers often creates the PDF in layers. So if you have one bullet in a layer in the back of your document and another bullet in the next bullet in the layer in the front of your document, those bullets will not show up in order by a machine tool that reads a PDF. They will be at the beginning of the PDF and at the end of the PDF, and there will be lots of stuff in between, and there will be no concept that these two bullets are related to each other. So if you want people to read from the top to bottom, you use something like Word or Google Docs or Apple Pages, and something that creates the PDF from the top to the bottom, not in terms of the farthest back layer to the farthest front layer. So don't use graphic tools, use word processors.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. All right, so I know you touched on this, but anything else you want to mention in terms of portfolios and what makes them effective?
Again, everything in your portfolio should talk to the job ad. So if you have case studies that don't talk to the job ad, take them out. You can use them for another one you send to another job, but they don't need to be in the job ad that you have. The case study itself should talk to the job ad. So those tell me a time when questions, if it asks, tell me a time when you took a mock-up and put it in high fidelity design and then gave that to developers, that should be the most obvious thing in the case study. If I have to read 5 pages of case study to get to that moment, I'm probably not getting there. So that needs to be clear at the top of the case study. This is my case study where I did this. Now, let me tell you how I did it. Let me tell you how long it took me. Let me tell you what the biggest challenges were. Let me tell you what I learned in the process. But damn it, that has to be at the top. If it is not at the top, then you are likely to lose somebody because they're going to look and they say, this has nothing to do with this job, and they're going to move on.
Cool. That's great points. I believe you also mentioned that the length and duration and the effort you put into the project is quite important, right? Or the case study, right? Could you please expand on that and maybe a bit more detail and let us know why that is the case?
The reason people care is because, especially for early career folks, it is really hard to tell what is something you did over a weekend, what is something you did on a 2-week school project, and what is something you worked on for every day for a year. And the problem is that, you know, when we look at a finished design, like look at the Q&A box that someone designed for Zoom, because I'm staring at that in front of me, right? How long did that take them? You have no way of knowing. How many versions did they go through? How many stakeholders did they work with? How many ideas did they get as they created new versions and then updated them, right? You know nothing about it. You don't know if this took them 10 minutes or if it took them 3 years to get to this final design. And they went through thousands of versions. But I got to tell you, that all that information means something to the hiring manager. And if you've only if a design is the first thing you did and you just spit it out and you've never put it in front of users, then they can't tell whether it's any good or not, because what do they know about the subject matter? But it's certainly not as good as one where you refined it and you refined it again and you got feedback and you refined it again and you made it so that something that used to take 15 minutes to do only takes 2 minutes to do using your design or whatever the refinement process was. And they want to hear that story. They want to know that you work on something until it's ready, and that you go to all sorts of different resources to find out if it's good enough. They want to hear how you decided it was good enough. Or if you just dashed this thing off and you've just made a million versions of it and you haven't gotten any feedback on any of them, so you really can't say, why is this the best possible design? That's what they want to know about. So if you don't give them any hints about how long it took, how complicated it was, who you worked with, any of those details, everything looks the same, right? If you gave me a Q&A box, I can't tell if you just copied one from some other app or if you actually designed something that users love. I mean, we can copy and paste all we want.
When you start talking about Zoom and how much time and effort they spent on their boxes, I was going to say not enough at first, but I think a lot of people complain about Zoom's UX not being the best.
Right.
All right, so we have another question from Safa, which got quite a few upvotes, right? So basically, it talks about boot camps versus universities, right? And in more detail, would you say that boot camps prepare people? And again, all boot camps are different, right? But that's the question. So would you say that boot camps prepare people enough for a realistic UX UI design job? How to stand out with boot camp experience versus university experience? I know it can depend a lot, but what do you think overall?
Nothing prepares you for a job. I mean, this is a fact of life. Any job you get, whether it's your first job or your 100th job, you will not be prepared for it, because every job is different. So it isn't about being prepared for a job. It's about having the skills and knowing how to use those skills to do the thing that the job wants you to do, and then being able to learn all the things that you didn't learn before you got there. So One of the problems with boot camps is that, and it's not the boot camp's fault, but it takes decades to become really good at something. You cannot learn to be good at something in 11 weeks. And you certainly can't learn to be good at something in 11 weeks where you never practice it more than once or twice. And most boot camps are set up so that you learn a thing, you practice it once or twice, and then maybe you practice it a third time in your final project, and that's it. And by the way, the final project was built so that you can get it done in a week, and it doesn't involve really that much practice. That's not going to get you very far, right? Nobody learns to be a concert pianist in 11 weeks. And nobody's going to learn to be a good designer or good research or any of those things in a couple of weeks. The key thing is that don't worry about it. Think of the boot camp as a launching pad for a lifetime of self-directed learning. Michael asked me earlier about soft skills, and if I were to say that there was a soft skill that you need, that every designer should have, every UX person should have, and frankly, everybody in their life should have, it's to always be learning, to never think you're done learning. You're not done learning when you finish school. You're actually just start learning the day you finish school. And so that's the key. And you want to make sure that you are just always you're just ready to always be learning new things that you've never learned before. And if you do that, you'll be fine. Every hiring manager complains about people who graduate for school, get to their first job, and they think they know everything. Don't be that person. Think you know nothing. Use the skills you've got, but just be excited to get all the new skills. Listen when someone tries to teach you something. Focus on how well you learn things. Figure out what ways you like to learn things. Do you learn better watching someone on a video? Do you like watching them do it 100 times so you keep rewinding the video and playing it again, rewinding it, playing again? Do you like learning things out of a book? Do you like learning things opening a book and then trying it yourself and then rereading the section of the book and trying it again? So this is what you need to do. And so I wouldn't worry about nothing prepares you for your first job, just like nothing prepared you for your first day of college, and nothing prepared you for your first day of high school, and certainly nothing prepared you for your first day of birth after being born, right? Nothing prepares you in life.
Maybe just the previous 9 months.
Yeah, no, it was completely different.
Probably was.
Trust me, nothing prepared you for that trip down the canal.
All right, so I know we're actually running pretty short on time, so we'll try to, I have a couple more questions, and I will take a few more quick questions from the audience as well. So June is asking, I know we touched on this, but this is a little bit more specific, right? So any interview or portfolio tips for a career changer? I have 7 years of banking, sales, customer service experience, but I don't have any UX real project experiences, only academic, and I'm struggling to stand out to UX hiring managers.
Banking. Oh my gosh. Yes. Customer service. Absolutely. Go find jobs in the banking and customer service businesses. Those 7 years of experience are going to be really helpful. So when you were a customer service person, I'm betting you use systems. When you worked in banking, I'm betting you use systems. The people who build those systems, none of them use those systems. So you would come in having this natural advantage because you actually understand what people do with those systems. You understand what made them frustrating, why they might not work effectively when you're trying to answer someone's question quickly on the phone, or when someone bounces around from topic to topic during a support call, or when you hit an edge condition in the banking thing and the system doesn't know how to handle someone who, for instance, is homeless and doesn't have a street address but wants a bank account because they have someone who gives them money on a regular basis and they want to put it in a debit card. This is, these are things that you would know if you worked in banking as a teller or if you worked in customer service. These are things that you would know that someone who has never done that wouldn't know. And you will be extremely valuable to a manager who is looking to get people who actually have that background. So you want to look in those industries because that's going to jump out as comparable experience. The stories you tell don't have to be UX only stories. Use the comparable experience that you have. You've lived on this planet for a long time. Use all of that.
Awesome. Jared, when you're evaluating a portfolio, right? Or let's say a hiring manager evaluates a portfolio, right? How can you usually tell hypothetical projects from real ones?
I can't. So I either have to assume or it will be the questions I ask. But the problem is anytime you make the resume or portfolio a puzzle for a hiring manager, you are making their job harder and they're going to gravitate to people who make their job easier. So why make it a puzzle to figure out? If it was something you threw together in a weekend, just be honest and say, I threw that together in a weekend. If it's impressive for a weekend's worth of work, someone's going to be impressed. If they need someone who can throw out designs really fast, you would be their person. On the other hand, if they need someone who is who can work on the same set of screens for 6 months and know how to take it through a process that evolves over 6 months, they're going to be looking for someone who's done that, and you're not going to be their person, which is okay. You don't have to be great at every job. You just have to be great at the one that they're going to hire you for. So don't try to be something for jobs you're not. If someone's trying to hire someone who juggles and you don't juggle, you're not going to get the job no matter how much you try to fake juggling.
Thank you, Jared. We have another question from Antonio, and I've heard this question many, many times as well, and kind of worthiness of master's degrees, right? So Antonio is asking, is getting a master's degree in UX worth it, in your opinion?
So there's a couple of answers to this. First, I've done much research on this over the years. What do people look for in education when they're hiring? And it turns out that the answer has to do with where did they go to school? Someone who got their master's degree from, say, SVA or Carnegie Mellon, they know what it takes to get a master's degree from SVA and Carnegie Mellon. So when somebody shows up with a resume that says, I got my master's degree from SVA, that's a shortcut for them. They say, oh, for you to get a master's degree from the School of Visual Arts, you must have done all these things because that's what I had to do. And as a result, they know a lot from you through that shortcut. But someone who graduated from the School of Visual Arts has no idea what a master's degree from Kent State has, or what a master's degree from Carnegie Mellon has, or what a master's degree from Stanford has. So they don't really care about that. So if you happen to know, and you might be able to find out by looking at, getting their name and looking them up on LinkedIn and seeing what their education is, that could be a shortcut for you. And that's possible. But for the most part, it doesn't make a difference. There are things you learn in a master's program, but a lot of people will tell you that they didn't learn a whole lot of new things in their master's program. It just put an official label on all the things that they'd already knew. On the other hand, there are programs where if you get a particular master's degree, you learn things that you didn't know. So, for example, if you're working in banking, maybe you don't need a master's degree in UX. Maybe you need a degree that teaches you how banking organizations work, how finance works, what all those terms are that you're designing for. Maybe you get that. So you sort of want to look at and say, well, where do I want to be working, and what do I know and what do I don't know? And where would an education that would give me a foundation would be a start? But at the end of the day, education doesn't count as comparable experience, at least not as much as actual work experience. So working in banking is much better than having a degree in banking. But for some places, it might be better. I got to tell you, when I was a programmer, I learned to program when I was 14 years old. I had my first programming job when I was 16 years old. When I was 18 years old, I was working in a production agency doing programming on accounting systems, corporate accounting systems, things that manage payroll and inventory and accounts receivable and accounts payable, all those things. And I had no idea what those terms were. So I went to the local community college and I took accounting 101 and accounting 102 and accounting 103. And by the time I was done with accounting 104, so that took me a year and a half, I knew what all those terms meant. And it dramatically improved my value. Because my day job was actually building these systems where when I was going to school, I was learning what the systems actually did. And having that domain knowledge made me much more valuable. So, if you want to go to school for something, I would recommend you go to school for the design, for the domain you want to eventually work in. I think that's going to be much more valuable than a master's in UX. But maybe there's a job where the master's in UX will prepare you better. But I for most people, for most jobs, I don't see it.
Thank you, Jared. So we're running out of time, so I wanted to make sure we're mindful of your time. How are you doing on time? Do you still want to?
Oh yeah, I don't have any. My next appointment is at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Okay, excellent. So we'll probably take all the questions from the Q&A. Just kidding. So here's what I wanted to ask. I know interviewing is a huge topic, and based on our earlier discussion, you mentioned it could be like a whole other talk in itself. If we were just look at a very high level, right? Maybe what do you think, like in your opinion, some of the key parts of phases that are most crucial for folks transitioning into the field to master initially, just like the key parts?
Okay, I'm going to repeat myself. Telling your story, right? Matching the job ad, being able to tell a dozen stories based on that job ad is what you need to do. Even when they don't explicitly ask. So if they don't ask you what was the most challenging part of the project, tell them anyways. If they don't ask you how long the project took, tell them anyways. Right? The more you can fill them in on your comparable experience, the more they're going to walk out thinking, damn, that person's impressive. So it's the stories. It always comes back to the stories. Interviewing is a storytelling process. It's telling your story. And so you want to be able to make sure that you are telling people's stories. And that's key. You do that well, you're going to be in great shape. You may not get the job, but you will at least practice telling your story, and you'll get better at it. And eventually, it'll be exactly the right thing for you to do.
Thanks, Jared. And what are your thoughts on mastering whiteboard challenges and some of the other kind of maybe take-home challenges also? Have you seen those many times?
I've seen them many times. You're not going to like my answer. Take-home challenges, if you have the privilege to do it, you stop the process, you go look at other jobs. Take-home challenges are prejudiced and discriminatory, and we shouldn't be doing them. They are, they benefit people who have lots of free time. So if you have a family or people you take care of or some other life thing, or like, let's say you're working a job, or maybe you're working two jobs because you haven't gotten your desired career yet. So just to make things happen in your life, you have to work a day job and a night job. Don't bust your ass on a hiring challenge, particularly one where it's the first thing they have you do, without as a sort of early screening thing. They're hiring crappy people. You don't want to work on their teams. Whiteboard challenges are only slightly less discriminatory. There are people who grow up in contexts or come from cultures where you learn to be incredibly polite in places where people are not close friends. And so your natural inclination is to stay very quiet and just listen and observe and not interact. But I've had hiring managers who swear by whiteboard stuff that what they're trying to do is see how much they interact. Well, those persons are naturally going to be discriminated against. Now, if they were on the team and they knew everybody and everybody was a colleague, they'd be much more open and discussive. But in a group of strangers, they're going to be extremely polite and quiet and not confrontational and not jumping up to offer ideas. And the problem with these types of evaluations is that the people who give them almost never have criteria written down as to how they would judge if the person passed or failed. And some of them will tell you, well, it's not a pass-fail thing. But in fact, they are making judgments that that person performed better than that person, so we're going to give the first one the job. And so it becomes theater. And you're measured on your performance skills, not on your actual skills to do the work. So it's discriminatory. And frankly, we shouldn't be allowing it. We should have a code of ethics that actually says you should not do this. And so I am dead set against them. And I am of the belief that any manager who swears by them is actually not a good manager. So again, don't worry if you fail that exercise, you've dodged a bullet.
Thank you, Jared.
We should just not be doing them. And so you can practice and try to get good at them, but it's like practicing improv. It's fine, it's a set of skills, it might be useful. Oh my gosh, the excuses managers have given me. I've had managers say, I'd like to see, I want to see how people think. Okay, let me tell you something from cognitive psychology 101. You cannot ever see how someone thinks. If we could see how someone thinks, there would be a lot fewer divorces in the world. Frankly, there'd probably be a lot fewer marriages in the world too. You cannot see how someone thinks. So I've had people tell me, I had a manager, oh my gosh, I had a manager tell me that they intentionally give them vague requirements to see what sort of questions they ask. And whether they and one person told me that they actually give them requirements that conflict with each other so that the person challenges them. Guess what? There are people who will never challenge a stranger. That's just not how they were brought up. It's not how they were taught. If the only reason that could possibly be a good way to test things is if you're always giving people conflicting instructions and they always have to challenge you. And if that's what you are as a manager, nobody wants to work for you. When we were doing research on how people hired, I had one manager say, "Oh, I have this favorite question I love to ask. What is the thing you hate most about your car?" And so I turned to the manager who just told me this. I said, just out of curiosity, what is the thing you hate most about your car? This guy was the head of design for a 1,000-person company. He says, "Oh, I'll tell you. There's a little button on my stick shift, and it's the overdrive button. But the problem is that when you press it in, the light goes on that says overdrive off. And so I would fix that by having the light on when it's not pressed in, because that's when the overdrive is on. So it should be when the overdrive is on, not when it's off." That told me everything about this dude, because this nice, privileged, older white man was telling me that he wants the buttons to be on, the lights to be on when the button is on in the on position, not when it's in the off position, except for the fact that when it's in the off position and you drive at normal speeds, you will damage your car. When it's in the on position and you drive at normal speeds, your car will be fine. Shouldn't the warning light be on when you are most likely to damage your car instead of always on? So he didn't actually know what the button did, yet he has opinions on how it should be designed. That told me everything.
That was good. That was good. Yeah. Now, they heard similar opinions about, especially take-home design challenges, and especially if they're related to what company works on, right? If it's like,
oh yeah,
that's
just
business,
a scam.
So
that's just a scam. That should be. You should be able to report companies, and they should be able to no longer hire people for 2 years as a penalty.
It's a lobby for a new law. All right, so Laura has a question. How else can junior UX designer enhance their portfolio to make a lasting impression? I know we've talked about this quite a bit, but anything else?
Well, what do you think the answer is, Michael?
Story.
Story about what?
Ensure it matches the job description, the
You've
requirements.
been paying attention. Comparable experience. That's the one thing your portfolio can have. That's it. Anything else is a waste of calories.
Awesome.
Which, by the way, was a phrase I learned at the White House. I had my manager at the White House would always talk about, we're not going to burn any calories on that. I love that saying.
Awesome. Yeah, so Crystal just asked a similar question about design challenges, which we just answered, which was great. So Diana, and by the way, if I mispronounce anyone's name, sorry, that's not intentional, obviously. I've gotten advice to make my portfolio UI focused and to keep case studies short for recruiters, but I've always gotten feedback from UX designers that they appreciate the length and thoroughness of a case study. Any advice on what to prioritize in a portfolio? So, yeah.
Short is not the same as easy to read. So there are things you definitely want to talk about. Those things better be at the top of the case study. So definitely have a summary section of your case study that says, if you read this case study, these are the things you will learn about me. This is the comparable experience I have, and you will learn that in more depth if you keep reading. So yeah, the recruiter is probably only going to read the first couple of paragraphs. So those first couple of paragraphs better have all the things you want them to see in them. But that doesn't mean you can't have more depth as you go into the document and read more and more. So it's a design problem. Design it for people who are only going to read the 2 paragraphs, and design it for people who are going to read every word of everything because they want real evidence that you are the most impressive person they've ever met. You seem like it, prove it. So that's what we want. How can you create one design that that meets both audiences' needs? It's a design problem. You are applying for a job as a UX person. You should be able to design this. And if you're not sure, ask people who are designers how you would solve this problem and learn from them. But that's the answer. The answer is you need both, because different people look at the case studies for different things. A recruiter who is the first line of defense when you get 600 applications and you've got to narrow it down to 15 that you're probably going to talk to. They're looking for that information. They're not going to read the whole thing. They're going to look at the first couple paragraphs of the first case study. And if you seem like the perfect candidate, they're going to put you in the pile that goes to the next step, or they're going to put you in the pile that doesn't. And you want them to put you in the pile that does. But if you're now talking to the person who's 3 steps away, who's preparing to have an in-depth conversation with you and wants to have a whole bunch of questions to find out if you are for real, that person's going to read every word.
Thank you, Jared.
So how do you create one thing that does both? That's the question. That's a design problem. I am absolutely confident, Diana, that you are up to this challenge.
Awesome. So David is asking, that's a pretty good question. Would you suggest focusing on one industry for a new UX designer to become that highly qualified candidates? For instance, concentrating on taking projects and getting roles in the medical field, so you're an expert in the medical field, and stand out to those companies? Because it seems like a tricky question, right? Because it can be risky to specialize on the other hand, but it can be very effective too. What do you think?
How many companies work in the medical field?
Let's see in the
Like
chat.
Hundreds of thousands. I mean, medical field's not going away anytime soon. If you are fascinated by the medical field, go do that. If you are fascinated by security, go do that. If you are fascinated by AI, do that quickly, because it's going to go away in a few years. All of these things are, if it's what your passion is, definitely go do that. If you never want to think about medicine again, definitely don't do it. Right? Work on your passion. Right? The thing is that right now, every field is growing, right? I have people who have made a career of logistics. What do? They make sure people's packages get to them on time. They've worked in the logistics industry for years. They know how customs works. They know how international packages works. They know how tariffs work. They know how billing systems work. They know how overnight delivery works. They know how slow shipment works. They know how rental trucks work. They know how cargo is calculated, how it's weighed, how it's priced. They know all these things. And guess what? If they apply to jobs at companies that do logistics, oh my gosh, they are the hot ticket. Because it takes years to master that stuff. I'm sure most of you didn't know anybody thought about that stuff. So the fact is that this is key. You need to find something you're passionate about and then go master every skill related to that. You'll probably never work for an industry that disappears, except for AI, because it's going to disappear. It's just a talking dog. It doesn't really work.
Since you mentioned that again, that's going to be my next question. And I know a few people asked about that too.
Before I rant about AI, I'm going to put this in the chat so that if people want to get more tips on all this stuff, we've got 3 hours of stuff that I haven't talked about that's in those things, and you can get it for $17, $17.99, because I gave you.
And I wanted to repeat also that Jared is actually given this. So $2 off means it costs Jared $2 to actually give it to you, because that's lower than cost.
It's lower than my cost. Yes. So it costs me more to actually make and host the series than it does that I'm charging you, but that's the best we could do.
So now we can do the AI rants, and I'd love to hear that, because usually I keep hearing completely different stuff. So, and one question from Diana also related to that, and there is a comment from Cassidy, wait, where is AI going? And Diana is also asking about AI, but it's slightly different. It's about people using AI to write their resume and cover letters and portfolio case studies. What's your opinion on that? So let's talk about AI.
So AI is the 2024 version of blockchain. It's something that lots of people have invested money in, that doesn't actually do what it's promised to do, and doesn't actually work. And it will never work. Because for one thing, it's run out of training materials. They've taken everything that they can get their hands on and trained all the models, and the models are still stupid. So as a result, it doesn't work. There's a bunch of ways to think about AI. So one way you can think about AI, particularly large language model AI, or what's known as generative AI, things like ChatGPT and Claude and these things, is that they are basically a talking dog, right? So if you Google talking dog, you will get all these videos of people who've built these or bought these fancy dog-sized keyboards that have words on them that dogs can make sentences out of. So the dog can press a sequence of buttons, and this thing has a speech synthesizer, and it says, Rover wants park. And the human will go, Rover wants to go to the park, and the dog will hit yes. And then they go to the park. Well, this is operant conditioning in its finest form. You know, does the name Pavlov ring a bell? The thing here is that Rover has learned what sequence of buttons gets him a trip to the park. And that's great. But never, ever think that you're having a conversation with Rover. You're not having a conversation with Rover. Rover just knows that if he puts his paw on a sequence of buttons, he gets to go to the park. This is not a conversation. This is, you can't ask Rover what he thinks of a former president being indicted for hush money for having sex in a hotel, right? Rover doesn't have an answer for this. Rover will never have an answer for this. And so this is, oddly enough, Republicans never have an answer for this either. So you can make the equivalences that you want. The thing is that These are not conversations. This is just learning something. And here's the thing. What these systems are trained on is they are giant mathematical models that know that when you put this series of words together, the next word should be this. So it's basically just autofill. It's clever autofill. That's all it's doing. And so it's never going to replace people. It is never going to do intelligent work. It can't possibly do intelligent work because what it's been trained on is all of the bad work along with all the good work. So it's basically just average work. It will only at best be able to do average things. And since the bad things are filled with mistakes, it will make mistakes about 50% of the time. So I actually don't think AI will take people's jobs. I think it will create jobs because we will have to create jobs for people to constantly correct the AI mistakes that are made. People call them hallucinations. They shouldn't be calling them hallucinations. They should call them pure gibberish because that's what they are. If you say, well, actually, I got this thing, but half of it was pure gibberish, that doesn't sound as good. So that's what we're talking about. So this is my take on AI.
Thank you, Jared. We should do a panel discussion with you and Jacob Nilsson. That'll be very fun to discuss AI stuff.
Someday I'll have to tell you the story about the time that one of the things I've done in my career many times is I've been an expert witness on in various court cases that involve UI and technology and things like that. And there was one case where I was an expert witness and the other side saw that I was on the expert witness list. So they Googled and they found Jacob and they put him on the other side. And I ended up not getting to testify because it turned out he was so poorly prepared for the testimony that he won the case for my side. His answers were completely the absolute wrong answers for his side, but they were the right answers for my side. So the lawyer turned around to me in the courtroom and says, I'm not putting you on the stand. He did all the work.
All right. So Jared, we do have to wrap up in a minute. So let's take the last question and then we'll wrap up. I know I have to run and it's been quite some time. So I really appreciate it. Kate, what we just had, was asking a follow-up question about your must-haves. 4 out of 5, you don't apply, right? Is that a no? Or
you can apply and cross your fingers, but if you have 4 out of 5 and someone else has 5 out of 5, you're not going to win. They need the 5th one, right? The must-haves literally are must-haves. If it's a good hiring manager, if it's not a good hiring manager, then they probably are iffy. If nobody has that one, if the 5th out of 5 is must have walked on the moon, then yeah, you're probably in the running because they sat down and put down an unfindable criteria, and they've just set the bar too high. But it's less interesting, and I would not burn as many calories as I would on one where you had 5 out of 5. Let me put it that way. So if you're making a list of which ones you should apply to, start with the ones where you have 100%.
awesome. Jared, thank you so much. This was awesome. So I hope you guys really enjoyed the event as much as I did and got some great insights. And by the way, Jared, what is the best way for folks in the audience to find or connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me there. I'm Leaders of Awesomeness, which you can join here, and you can send me messages on the Leaders of Awesomeness community. And you can also come to centercenter.com, and there's a contact page there, and you can reach out to me there. All of those are fine ways to do that. So.
Awesome, awesome. And if you guys want more free UX career resources, you can also go to I know you asked about different questions and topics. We've done quite a few different events about different UX career topics, especially. So you can just go to the resources section of our site and just enjoy. There are like lots of free, great resources. And Mika is going to put the link in the chat. Awesome. So we frequently run different types of virtual events, as I just mentioned. So we'll keep you guys updated about upcoming events and share resources via our newsletter that is usually sent every like few weeks or so. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you again so much, Jared, for taking the time to join us and provide all the valuable insights. It was a huge pleasure to have you on here.
It was really a lot of fun. You all asked really great questions. I know that you're going to go off and be awesome. So go make some awesomeness.
Awesome. Have a good night.